What's going on, nerds and virgins? Back for another week of some MMA action. We had a great week last week. Swept the board on the bets. Had a great DraftKings night. We also swept the board on the early games for the NFL 1 o'clock games. Anthony hit a massive prediction with a plus 425, I believe it was, in Dalby. So a lot of you guys, if you guys rode that, you guys did well. So overall, very, very good week for us. We had a good turnout as well with new subscribers and stuff. If you're going to be a new subscriber, if you're thinking about subscribing to us, this is probably the time to do it this week. We have a huge card coming up that we're going to discuss a little bit about now. And we obviously, we're starting to turn on a little bit of a heater right now. So now's the time to kind of jump in, check us out, see what we offer, get involved with the community. We're going to probably do some giveaways and stuff like that for the subscribers, so it should be fun. Before I get started, click the notification bell, subscribe to the channel, comment below, let us know what you think, if you agree with my takes or not. My partner in crime is not here today. I believe he is in Mexico. So I am flying solo today on a very big card. I'm going to start off with the main event. And just for the mere fact that I really want to get into detail in this now that I'm kind of doing this solo, I want to really jump into the kind of use my education, the things that I was taught in college and stuff like that, and really put it to test in this fight. You know, you got a very, very big fight here in Alex and Jiri. When you look at this, you got to, you know, a lot of people are going to sit here and they're going to tell you, look, let's break down the film. Let's look at how they match up. Let's see the stylistic matchup. You really can do that to a point, but then you got to kind of shut it off, right? Because what did we know of Jiri? We've seen certain things of Jiri. We've seen certain styles of him. We've seen his grappling. We've seen a fight that he almost lost. He should have lost. He ended up coming back from the jaws of defeat and winning the fight in the last seconds. But these are all things that we knew, right? So you got to use that word in the past tense, knew. The things that we know, we just don't. We're shooting blindly. This is a guy who's coming off a very, very serious injury, and that's what I want to get into. I want to get into a little bit about this injury, and I'm not here to sway you, okay? I'm not here to sit here and tell you guys, look, forget about what you think, forget about your opinions, my word is gospel. That's not the case at all. But what I want to do is I want to give you every opportunity to either back in or back out on your pick in this situation. And my job as an analyst and for my background that I do have with kinesiology and exercise science, I want to bring certain elements to your table that maybe certain people can't bring, to the table. And one is this injury. Now, when you deal with injuries and you deal with, Dana White coming onto the platform, or you deal with a football coach or a baseball coach that come on and they talk about the injury, what do they do when they come onto the press conferences? They're telling you, look, we fear that it's a torn ACL. We fear that it's a concussion. We're doing tests tomorrow. Then what happens? And Adam Schefter and all these people come on, Twitter, and they say, confirmed concussion, confirmed ACL. Same thing with fighting. It's the same exact thing. When guys get injured, they go into medical suspension, right? It's a very common occurrence. Even if they're not hurt. If they go into a war, they go into like a mandatory medical suspension for, it could be weeks, it could be months, it could be days. A situation like this where the injury was so bad that the only confirmation we got is, quote unquote, it's the worst injury I've ever seen. A doctor coming on, it's the worst injury I've ever seen to a shoulder. But they never told you what it was, right? They never came out and literally told you point blank, this is what he tore, this is what he did, this is the surgery. It was kind of ghosted. It was just the worst shoulder injury I've ever seen. So that kind of drew a red flag for me. So I did a lot of digging. I did a lot of diving. I did a lot of my own, knowledge of what I've known. I've even talked to a buddy of mine who's a doctor in another state that we had an extensive conversation the other night. We were trying to put the pieces together. And that in itself is just not a bad, that's not a good thing. When they're not coming out and they're not telling you exactly what happened, it's almost like they don't know. They're just going in and they're repairing something. But after putting all the pieces together, I kind of figured out, the causes of it. I know the causes of it, and I also know the extent of how bad or how not so bad it could have been. So the injury occurred, obviously we know that his shoulder dislocated, right? And the biggest concern with a dislocation, no matter what, if it pops in the right way or it pops out, pops in easily or not, once the injury occurs, is obviously your labrum. Your labrum is an O-ring, okay? So your labrum, pretty much, if you look at, your socket of your shoulder that sits into the joint, around there, picture you married guys out there with wedding rings on your finger. That's what the kind of labrum looks like. It's like an O-ring around the socket. Okay, so what happens is when that joint pops out, it rubs against the O-ring, which is the labrum, and it tears the labrum. So it's a very common thing when you have a dislocated shoulder. I've dislocated my shoulder twice. I tore my labrum once. Someone tells me they're dislocated, the first thing I think of right away, well, the biggest fear we have is a labrum. Now, the thing is that when you pop your shoulder out of place, you have to pop it in the proper way. If you don't pop it in the proper way, you can cause serious damage, like very, very bad traumatic damage. Another thing I have experience with my ankle, and I'll explain that in a minute. So when you dislocate your shoulder, if you pop it in, that is held together by muscles, muscle tissue, ligaments, tendons. So you got to picture almost like an elastic band. Like these things are just holding it together with one nerve that wraps around it like a hot dog called the axillary nerve. So when this thing popped out and they popped it in the wrong way, they traumatized the tendons. They tore all four corners of the rotator cuff, all four muscles. They traumatized tendons, ligaments, and an injury like that, you're definitely tearing your labrum. That's the first thing that goes, and you're dealing with the axillary nerve at that point. You got all these functionalities now that is literally a weapon for this guy. This is not like his knee, or even though that still is a weapon as well in fighting, but you're talking about a guy who you're using both hands to fight, and now you just took away one of his weapons. Like literally took away one of his weapons. The rotator cuff, the shoulder, everything that you kind of generate and you snap with, that's completely done and shot. He had to have major surgery on that. Now, when you look at that and you say, well, what is the healing time? What is the healing time on something like that? Well, there's a lot of injuries that you could work around. You know what I mean? You could work around certain injuries. Even if you break your ankle or you mess up your knee, you could keep your timing with your hands. You could use your hands on speed bags, on heavy bags. You could just shadow box. You could do things that kind of keep yourself physically active. You can't do that when you have even a torn labrum, never mind major reconstructive surgery on your shoulder, because you're in a sling, and what are you going to do? You can't use one hand. You could train legs. You could do certain things, but that doesn't help your timing. That doesn't help your range management. It doesn't help your, all that stuff that you need to be, especially a dynamic striker like he is. So now you're dealing with a 9-month layoff at the very minimum for an injury like this. I had a buddy of mine who tore his shoulder up really, really bad, believe it or not, in a bar fight back in Jersey, and the recovery was insane for him. And this guy wasn't even an athlete. So you're looking at a 9-month recovery period, and then after that, like, you got to remember, as soon as that comes off and you're ready to go, you're not sitting there and you're not hitting the bag and you're not doing all these things right out of the gate. You got to work your way back and slowly. You got to do rehabilitation. You got so many things you got to do to work back up to that point that you were, if you're ever at that point ever again. Because once you start dealing with ligaments, once you start dealing with tendons, once you damage that nerve, like, you got to picture, if you go to a concession stand like at a Yankee Stadium or something, you see those hot dogs wrapped in bacon. Well, that's what that nerve looks like. It's one single nerve that wraps around your humerus down to your arm, that if that thing is traumatized, you have no idea what. You got to remember, your brain fires off to your body what it wants, what you want to do. So if you throw a punch, your brain is signaling to that nerve, lift up the arm, throw the punch. You don't know what kind of damage was done there. You don't know what his reaction times are going to be. You don't know really anything about Jiri from this point on. You know what he was. You know what he looked like before the injury. You know all these things about Jiri before the injury, but you cannot in any way, shape, or form bring that into right now. You just can't do it. It's humanly impossible. You're throwing a dart. Now, skip over that for 1 second. Now we're going to go over to Alex Pereira, and you're looking at a guy who, has he looked that great? I mean, no, he really hasn't. I mean, at middleweight, people were kind of all over him at first. They marketed him the right way. This was, this is the new scary, the scary guy that's coming in, and he's the only guy that knocked out Izzy and stuff like that. And it was quite apparent that this guy's weight cuts were insane, for his body somatotype. It was almost like me trying to get down to 205, him getting down to 185. It was just asinine. You look at him now at 205, this is a guy who, like we said, this is where he needs to be. This is where he's going to be most dangerous. And has he looked that good? No, he hasn't looked tremendous. He looks effective. You know what I mean? He looks effective, but he doesn't look like this monster that we all claimed him not to be. Now, there could be a lot of things involved. Is it because he's just starting to get comfortable there? Is his power maybe not translating up? Because that's a very important factor too. Is he fighting a little bit more cautious because he's still kind of feeling that size out? There's a lot to be, tied into that. But what we do know about him is he is active. He is healthy. He hasn't been injured. He hasn't been sidelined. He hasn't been put on the shelf. These are the things we do know about. Whether he's good or whether he's not good, you know what he's going to bring to the table. He's going to bring more to the table than he did his last fight. He's training with Glover. Obviously, Glover fought Jiri, so he's kind of got a map. He's kind of got a blueprint for him, what he's good at, what he's not good at. So you got to expect him to be a little bit better. You know what I mean? You got to expect him to be in a little bit better physical shape. You can't question his cardio anymore. He went 5 rounds. He went 5 rounds in altitude. Whether it was a sluggish fight or not a sluggish fight, the guy still did go 5 rounds in altitude. There's a lot of question marks that we still have about Alex and where he stands in the 205 division, but there's not that much as far as the question marks of what he's going to bring to the table. You have no idea what Jiri's bringing to the table. Zero. So it almost goes back to like football. Let me ask you a question. You have Christian McCaffrey, let's say. Okay, he tears his ACL. Are you going to bet a prop on him that he's going to rush for 100 yards his first game back? You know how good he was, right? You know how good he was. You know how good, the guys, the touchdown machine, yardage machine. You know how good Christian McCaffrey was. But now he's coming off an ACL recovery. That's his weapon. His legs are his weapon. His first game back, are you going to throw money down that he's going to rush for 100 yards right out of the gate without seeing anything? You're absolutely not. So how can you sit there and say, you know what? Jiri just took away one of his biggest weapons. I'm going to bet the money. I'm going to bet money, or I'm going to pick that he's going to come back and win this fight. You just can't do it. You're blindly doing it. And I know that our girl Christine, this is her guy. We actually have like a shoey bet on this, where if I win, I got to drink something funky on the show, and if I win, she's got to drink something funky. So on that side, it's almost like, okay, well, you're rooting for him, like you want him to win, and for her sake, I hope he does win. But I can't sit there and pick him when I don't know what he's going to look like when he comes back. It's just not educated. It's just not a realistic standpoint for me. I'll be picking what do I hope to see to what am I going to see. I know what I'm going to see from Peloton. I know what he brings to the table. I know his weaknesses. So for me, I just think Jiri's going to be dynamic. He's going to look good. He's going to try to take it down to the ground. But I think after a moment, you're going to see like his timing is just a little off. There's going to be a little bit cage rust there. He's extremely hittable. I think Alex Pereira is going to look like the stronger guy in there, even though physically looking wise, he may not look it. You're going to see a guy in there that you could see, while that guy was laid up, this dude was just a little bit more active. He was putting in the time in the weight room, where Jiri just couldn't. It's not that he didn't want to, he couldn't. And I think that's going to start rearing its head as the fight goes on. I think him being extremely hittable is going to be a big issue for him. I also think there's a little burn-in with redemption here for Alex Pereira. I think he wants to get this one back for his coach. You got to remember, at 40 years old, Glover was beating him from pillar to post. Like that was like a 4-round-to-1 fight if he didn't get caught at the end of the 5th round. Now people are saying, well, Jiri's grappling is really good. Why? Because he submitted Glover when he was completely exhausted. So does that mean Fluffy Hernandez grappling is good because he submitted Rodolfo Vieira when he's completely exhausted? His grappling is better than Peloton's, but I wouldn't consider it like this big crazy weapon that he has. But I do agree that's probably his only path. His only path is to get this fight to the ground and probably submit him or get on top of him and ground and pound him. I don't see him, out styling Peloton on the feet. I just really don't. So I'm gonna go to Alex Pereira by knockout, probably sometime between the 4th and the 5th round. I think Jiri's just gonna be eating too much damage at one point, and he's gonna be able to really track him down. I would think it's a fantastic story if Jiri can pull this off. I know that the line seems like it's almost like a pick'em fight. I'm sure there's a lot of fan, push on that. A lot of money coming in with fan eyes. I don't see the line should be that way at all. I think it should be a little bit, think it should be much heavier in the favor of Peloton, maybe like a minus 160, minus 170, just because he's coming off the injury. So that's my official pick. I'm not trying to sway you, but you take for what it is. If you guys want the article, I got a monster article that I wrote on this fight and all the other ones. Go check it out, the MadLabMMA.com. Next fight, you got Pavlovich versus Aspinall. This is a great fight. This is a heavyweight fight with two guys that we actually want to see, right? This is separating the men from the boys here. You got Pavlovich, who came into the UFC on his debut, didn't look so great. He ends up coming back, winning 6 straight, all in the first round by knockout. Got a guy in Aspinall who was extremely highly touted, coming over the pond in the UK. Just an overall talent. This guy reminds me of for you OGs, it reminds me of a Frank Mir 2.0 type of style. He's an athlete. They even look alike a little bit. He's very athletic. He's got good striking. He's got very good grappling. He's kind of nimble on his feet for a heavyweight. Where Pavlich's more of I got power. I still got some athletic ability. I could still move, but I load up with a lot of my shots and I try to finish you. So when you look at that and you say, all right, well, what do you rather have? Well, my grandfather and my father used to always teach me, you go with the boxer over the puncher. And I do the same thing with MMA. I'll always take the technician over the puncher, even though we talk about the Derek Lewises of the world and stuff like that, where they can absolutely catch you. And I'm not saying Pavlovich isn't athletic, and I'm not saying he's not technical at all. But I'm saying from a technicality standpoint, we to look at a guy like Aspinall, he's just a little faster, he's a little sharper, he's got a little cleaner boxing, he's got better grappling, he has more paths to win. where Pavlovich really has to hunt you down. And if Pavlovich hunts you down and catches you, we're going to see that big question mark, does Aspinall have a chin? Because we haven't really seen him checked yet, right? Like, how many times have we seen Aspinall checked? But the question mark on the other side is, what's going to happen if this fight goes into the second and third round? We've never seen Pavlovich there in the UFC. He's only been in 7 fights, 1 round done. We don't know if that power is going to start dwindling down, if him loading up. Is he going to get frustrated? Is he going to chase, Aspinall all around the cage? So for my money, this is a very close fight, but I do think Aspinall should be the favorite. I think he just has more tricks in the bag, a little bit faster, a little bit more athletic, a little sharper. Obviously, I think if he gets it to the ground, there's the edge there. He just can't get caught. He has to fight this very, very smart. If I was him, and I was his corner, I would be telling him, look, go out there, play possum with him a little bit. Tag him, let him gas himself out, let him chase you. Play Matador with him, and then start picking him apart and picking your spots in the second and third round and seeing if you can finish this guy. So I'm going to go Aspinall. I'm going to go Aspinall inside the distance. I don't know if he's going to finish him by submission or KO. He can finish him both ways, but a very, very good fight definitely on the horizon on Saturday for that one. Next one, Andrade versus Dern. This is a really good one. This would have been a really good one around 5 years ago. 5 years ago, Jessica Andrade was the fighter that everybody feared. And just like I put Aspinall in the category of Frank Mir, I take Andrade and I look at her like a modern-day MMA version of Smoking Joe Frazier. She's just very bullish. She's got that small stature. She puts her head down. She comes forward, and she just looks to swing. And she doesn't give 2 shits. She will eat 1. She will eat 2 to give you 1. And I've always loved those type of fighters. That's why I always loved, Joe Frazier. He was one of the guys that I used to study all the time. Even though it didn't seem so technical, there was a rhyme and a reason and a rhythm behind it. Andrade now has made it perfectly clear that, like, her days are coming to an end. So what is she doing now? She's just taking fights. Does she want to win them? Yeah, she wants to win them. But she's kind of taking fights right now to supplement her income so she has a little bit easier life when she retires. It's not about the belt anymore. It's not about taking top contenders anymore. She is totally fine being a kind of like a gatekeeper for some of these girls coming up, making a decent payday on the pay-per-view, getting some pay-per-view points, and then in a couple years just pack it up, retiring, no harm, no foul. And the UFC knows that too. The UFC knows that she still has a little something in her tank. She still is tough. She's still Jessica Andrade. Looks great on your resume if you beat her. There's a lot to be desired when you sign a fight with Jessica Andrade. This is a total setup for Dern, though. This is the name on her resume that she needs. This is a girl who, when she first came in, a lot of people weren't believers in her, and I was yelling from mountaintops, like, you guys got to understand that there's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners and there's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu elite wizards. And this girl's father is Megaton Diaz, who literally, she's been grappling, she's been out of the womb. And she's just not some ordinary black belt. She's just not some ordinary Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu player. This is a girl who is an actual Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu ace. She does this with her eyes closed. She doesn't think about her transition. She doesn't think about where she has to go. It's like human nature. This is a girl who's extremely dangerous on the ground. Now, before she had her kid, she was a mess. And she literally let me down because I was touting her, and she was missing weight. She was coming in out of shape. She was coming in fat. She looked like shit. I literally was like, what is going on with her? Like, she literally bought into, I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu ace, and I don't need to train. And that's what she did. I mean, that's basically what she did. Then she took a couple L's. She ends up having a baby, and all of a sudden now she's in the best shape I've ever seen her in. She's winning fights. Her striking is getting better. She's becoming an all-around fighter, and obviously she still has that nasty threat on the ground. So how does she win this fight? Well, Dern and her grappling takes advantage of your mistakes. Andrade is the type of fighter who I just told you a couple minutes ago, she will take 2 to hit you with 1, which means she makes mistakes, which means she gets hit, which means she exposes her hips. She does all these things that'll give you plenty of opportunities to lock a body lock on her, to trip take her down, to even submit her standing up if she charges in too much, because she kind of leads with her head. She's got that Smoking Joe style where she's just like back and forth. She will not hesitate to take Dern down. She's just got that mentality. She will look to go in there, bull rush her, and maybe body lock Dern to take her down. That would be the biggest mistake of her life. I think eventually this fight's going to hit the floor. I think that Dern will probably end up bull rushing her at some point just to get hands on her, just to take her to the ground. Or Andrade is going to try to take her to the ground, and Dern is going to accept position or reverse on top of her. And depending on what part of the round it's in, you're going to see a sub here. So I'm going to go with Dern by submission. I don't know which round it's going to be in, but I would hope that she tries to get this down quick and early. Andrade is not out of the fight. Like I said, Dern does get sloppy at times, but I just think Andrade is going to give up way too many holes in this fight for Dern. So give me Dern by submission. We got 2 more fights to go. We have Frevola versus Saint-Denis. This is a great fight. It's great on paper, I should say. It's great on paper, but a lot of people, this is the problem. They see like Frevola on this little run, and all of a sudden they're marking him to be like this next contender. I think Matt Frevola is a very good fighter. From the stems of New York and stuff like that. He's a very good fighter. But for me, it ends there, right? Because I know Matt Frevola before he started going on this run. He was a little bit chinny. Everybody was kind of concerned with him. Whenever he fought a guy with a little bit of power, everybody was like, Frevola, he's good, but, he's good offensively, but defensively, you can shut his lights off. So what changed? Like, all of a sudden, he's on this little run. He's knocking dudes out, and he's winning, and he's having these big fights. And all of a sudden, everyone's like, okay, well, this is a new Matt Frevola. Yeah, it could be a Matt Frevola 2.0, but at the end of the day, you can't fix your durability. Like, your durability is your durability. You could fix your offense. You could fix your defense. You could fix your grappling. You could fix your boxing. You could fix even your mental state going in. I know a lot of guys who went to, sport therapists because they would literally have adrenaline dumps going into the cage, and that's how they would lose their fight. They would literally talk themselves into a loss. But you can't fix your durability. That's just your genetic code. That's the way you're wired. You're either a durable guy or you're not. You can't have some guy hitting you with a fucking mini baseball bat all week just to get your chin going. So, what changed? Why is everybody such a huge Matt Frevola guy? Well, we've seen Saint-Denis. This is a guy who worked for Special Forces. This is a guy who's a proven dog. He will drag you into deep waters, and that's the way he wins his fight. Is this a style that you want that Saint-Denis has? No, you don't want his style because eventually longevity is going to take over. You can't stay durable together forever. You can't take that punishment forever. Eventually, you're going to start seeing splinters and cracks. And when things splinter and crack, just like wood, eventually it's going to break. Saint-Denis is still young, though, so he can afford to take that damage. But if he continues to fight wars like this, if he continues to have fights that are just like fights of the night and almost like a Gaethje's an anomaly. But if this guy continues to do this, eventually the splinters are going to crack and we're going to see him knocked out cold and we're all going to be sitting there like, wow. Almost like Drew Dober. It happened to Drew Dober, right? How durable is Drew Dober? We never thought we would see him like completely waxed on the canvas like that. So the same thing with Saint-Denis, but he still has a lot of tread on his tires until it happens. So this isn't the fight that happens. However, Frevola is a guy who can't be dragged into a war. You drag him into a war, I think he gets knocked out. Frevola's a guy who needs to pick and choose his firefights. He'll have a short firefight with you. He steps out, he resets, he thinks about what he's doing. He comes back in, he has another firefight. He has these mini firefights with you within the round where Saint-Denis is just going after you. He's trying to drag you into a foxhole. He's trying to get muddy with you. He's trying to drag you into deep water and see if you could swim. So that's the way I think this fight goes down. I think Saint-Denis drags him into the jungle, man, and just literally strangles him. I don't know if he's going to knock him out. I don't know if he's going to sub him. I could see him knocking him down, and I could see him jumping his back, or I could see him knocking him out cold. I could see him winning all facets. Frevola, to me, probably has to catch him. I just don't see, even if he catches him, him knocking him out. The longer this fight goes, the more I got to give it to Saint-Denis. I got Saint-Denis. I got him inside the distance. Last fight of the night. This is a really, really good fight. This is one of the fights I'm really looking forward to. You got Diego Lopes versus Matt Sabatini. Sabatini is a guy where everybody's super high on. Even I was high on him coming in. I'm still high on him. I think he's a good fighter, but he's too one-dimensional for me, right? There's a guy with good wrestling, very good grappling. He's a black belt under Daniel Gracie, that whole Philly crew out there. He's got some college wrestling under his belt, so he is well-rounded on that end of the spectrum. You got Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and you got the wrestling to get it down. The problem is his striking. His striking is putrid. It's fucking literally putrid. And you got a guy, Diego Lopes, now who he comes in, and this guy is not only giving Joanderson Brito a good fight on the Contender Series, but then he comes in, he debuts, he has a good fight. He loses, but he has a good fight. Then he comes in, he wins. I think he ends up winning by submission in his last fight. So when you look at him, you're saying, well, this guy, what does he do good? Well, he's super active on the ground. He constantly breaks his hips free. You're never locking his hips down. Always looking for submissions. If you watch that fight against Joanderson Brito on Contender Series, even though Brito was winning the fight, he was locking him up in chokes and arm bars and leg locks. He was getting him in numerous amounts of, caterpillar positions where you were just like, this guy does not stop. Where does this gas tank end? And Sabatini is a guy who's going to take it to the ground. He's absolutely 1,000% going to take this fight to the ground. So not only is he going to have to get this to the ground and get offensive, but he's going to have to get this to the ground and be offensive, but be mindful and be defensive as well, because Lopes is going to be throwing up legs, looking for arms, looking for necks. He's constantly moving. And if he gets back to his feet, feet. If he utilizes this in a defensive manner to get back into his feet, where is Sabatini beating him on the feet? He's not going to. So this is another fight where I just see a path. Like, who has the most paths to win here? Who's more well-rounded? Listen, I don't disagree with the price here because Lopes is a very mild underdog. I think you can go both ways on this. I see why Sabatini's the favorite, but I'm going to go with the dog here. I'm going to go with Diego Lopes here. I'm going to say by decision. I think he's going to have a lot of escape routes in this fight, but ultimately I think he's going to land the bigger shots. He's going to have the bigger moments in a round. I think he squeaks by a decision here. So that is the main card, guys. We have a monster week in fights. We got the prelims. We got the early prelims. We got obviously the huge main card. I'm going to have content for everything. I already posted the main card breakdowns, which is very extensive. We have full DFS, full wagers. We have free NFL. We're going to be doing, giveaways inside the, usually for the pay-per-view events, we do, DK giveaways and stuff. Just a litany of shit. Great community, guys and girls. Come over the MadLab MMA, have fun with us, and sweat some fights. I will talk to you guys next week. Wow, I got a fucking sore throat from that. Jesus Christ. Did I shut the fuck? I didn't think I came up for air.